Confessions of a Spanish Teacher, Part 7. If you want to listen to the other parts, please check out the playlist for Confessions of a Spanish Teacher. Chapter 7. Spain Beckons. So here I was, a single mother with a degree in politics, mortgage arrears, and a dream to live in Spain. My friend Martine had gone to live in Spain and then come back. Patrick came to see the baby a couple of times, but not exactly on a regular basis. Just before he died, Terry had taken an extension out on a joint loan we had without my permission. The bank informed me that as it had originally been in both our names, he could do that without my signature, and that I was now liable for the whole loan. I was on income support to supplement my part-time earnings from the tow, but I was told that as I had a mortgage rather than paid rent, this would not be paid. My mortgage was £300 a month. They would not pay that. But if I moved into a private rental at £650 a month, they would pay that. Bloody ridiculous. I found a buyer for my house and we planned a trip to Spain for a month. My son was 9 months old. I had a little bit of equity. In this I'd not been very lucky, as if I had waited another year, I would have had a lot more. The economy was improving under the new Labour government and property values started to increase. But hey-ho, swings and roundabouts, I had enough money to live for a year, and I was already thinking that if I found somewhere to live, I would stay in Spain at least for a while. I found somewhere. The month passed and my friend Martine returned to the UK without me. I remember how bereft I felt when she first returned. Sometimes I would see someone who looked like her and get a huge rush of happiness that she had come back, only to feel a crushing loneliness when I realised it was not her. I felt so lonely. Many times I thought about returning to the UK, but there were so many questions. Where would I live? Where would I work? Would I see Patrick? Would he have any role in my son's life? I had a couple of insignificant relationships, nothing worth mentioning. Social life in Spain was all about drinking and bars. No one ever invited you around for a cup of tea, and if they did, when you got there, you were normally offered wine. If you already have a drink problem, Spain is not the place to come and live. I started playing darts for a local bar. I took my baby everywhere with me, which in hindsight was probably not a good thing to do. I started to learn Spanish, quite half-heartedly at first, if I'm completely honest. My first year in Spain was like a big long holiday, I suppose. Every time I thought about returning to the UK, things would happen to keep me there. People would come to visit. I would find a cheaper place to live and move. Lots of different things, really. One suitor I had was called Ray. God bless him, he is no longer with us. He was a fair bit older than me, and he took my son and I under his wing a little bit. Ray had previously been living with a lady called Val, but they were now apart and had been for some time. I was not interested in him romantically, however, and not really in anyone. My experience with Terry had put me off relationships, and I think it still does. I never wanted to feel so responsible for someone else's happiness again. However, he was good company, and he also played darts at the bar where I did. One night after playing, he walked us home and came in for a coffee. Nothing more, he had a coffee and he went. The next morning I came down to my car to find the tyre slashed. Another resident from my block of flats told me that he had seen Val wandering around in her nightie and listening outside my door. I could never prove it was her, but I did challenge her about it and she practically admitted it. What is it with these crazy people? Ray went on to marry a lovely German lady and return to the UK. He then put my name forward as a tenant for the nice little villa he had been living in, and we moved in there, where we settled for approximately 4 years. In that first year in Spain, we had lived in 4 different accommodations. I don't know if I made the right decision in coming here. I will never know how my life would have turned out if I had not. I would not have learned Spanish. I would not have written my books on learning Spanish. And I would not be writing this book either. I have had many lovely experiences in Spain, but it has been tough, especially financially. It's hard to get a good job in Spain and hard to earn enough money to live. Little or no help from the government, so it's a constant struggle to make ends meet. Sometimes things are good, business is doing well. Then the recession, or what they call in Spain la crisis, the crisis, decimated the Spanish economy, especially areas like this one that rely on tourism. Then we were just recovering from this when COVID struck, and then the double whammy of COVID and Brexit. Life is difficult in Spain, not just for me, but for many, many people. Who knows what's going to happen next? However, here I was, I'd finally realised my dream. Did it start with the Vicki that was telling my dad, I'm going to live in Spain one day? Separating from my husband? My friend coming here to Spain? Terry's suicide? Having my baby? It's very difficult to find a clear beginning to any story, isn't it? I don't know exactly where it all started, but I was here for better or worse. Chapter 8, Living the Dream. I actually do not like the expression living the dream. Many people think that living in Spain is some kind of perfect life. It's not. You have all the same problems as you would anywhere else. It's just a warmer and prettier place to have them in. Your problems don't disappear magically, whether they're financial, health, personal, etc. Once I got talking to some holidaymakers on the beach, and one of the ladies even said, "Oh, you don't get illness here, do you?" Bloody ridiculous. Unless you're financially secure, life is hard. No handouts. You have to work hard for everything you have, and really hard. You don't have your normal support network of family and friends. You have to make new ones. You work more hours for less money. It's not all cocktails on the beach. People who live here really normally can't afford cocktails on the beach. Only tourists can. And you have the language barrier, which I had too at first. However, all that said, it is generally cheaper to live here, so I suppose everything is relative. Certainly eating out, etc. is very reasonable, so we do tend to do it more here than you would in the UK. That first year I was here and not working was 1997. There were a couple of significant events that year. We lost Princess Diana. I'm not a royalist, I'm a Republican. But like many others, despite this, I love Diana. The morning she died, I walked up to the local bar for a coffee, unaware, and saw the news coming through there on the television. An awful time for anyone British, whether you were a royalist or not. We watched the funeral at a friend's house, as we had no television. Then this friend, Chris, was also to die a tragic death when a couple of months later, he and his brother-in-law were gassed by a faulty gas spoiler. They had been in the bar where his wife was working and gone home just minutes before her. When she arrived home a very short time later, they were both dead, and she barely escaped with her life, coming out of the house on her hands and knees, choking. Carbon monoxide poisoning. If you have an inside gas boiler, I would recommend either moving it outside or changing it to electric. I would never have gas in my house again. Electricity may be more expensive, but what price your life? All these kinds of events help you realise that life is fleeting, and moreover that it changes continuously. We're not guaranteed tomorrow or even the afternoon, and we should live life to the full for as long as we're able to. Another two acquaintances of mine died, one in a car accident, another of a heart attack, although quite young. It was quite a year. Chapter 9. Becoming a teacher. As ever, life went on and I was running out of money. I had invested some of it on an intensive course to learn Spanish for the peseta equivalent of €500. It was a good investment, not only for learning Spanish, but also I did end up working at that academy in Torrevieja later on. At that time, I was doing anything and everything to bring money in and keep afloat. Airport runs, babysitting, cleaning, etc. The easiest work to get in this area is, of course, in the bars or restaurants. But I could not do that, as I had my now nearly 2-year-old son to think about. He was at nursery, which was very reasonable price compared to the UK, but of course, only daytime. I saw an advert for a native English teacher in Alicante, a couple of early evenings a week. I applied and I was accepted. It was miles away, an hour and a half drive, and the few hours a week I worked only just covered the petrol really. However, I needed experience and this was the first teaching job I was offered. I remember vividly the first class I taught. I was just shown into a classroom, handed a board pen, and the kids marched in. No planning, no advice about what level they were, and there were a lot of them. I was terrified. Anyway, it must have gone okay as I was invited to continue. I worked there a couple of months, and then with my updated CV, I applied at an academy that was closer, where I'd done my intensive course, and I got the job. The whole interview was in Spanish. I just agreed to everything, but I certainly did not understand everything. I was offered the job. When I came out to my car after the interview, it had disappeared. This was my first experience with the mysterious parking rules in Spain. If you park where seems to be fine, and if you park where appears to be fine, you could get towed away. If you park where you're not too sure and you think maybe you can't park, you're normally fine. My new boss helped me to track down my car, which had been taken to the pound. €80, thank you very much. In Spain, you're charged for the towing away of your vehicle and then each hour that your car is in the pound. So you better hope that you find out where it is quickly. If you're not sure if a parking space is okay or not, look at the pavement at the side. If it isn't, you'll see traces of stickers left for previous unfortunate souls who've had their vehicles removed. Although this academy was much closer, it still took me nearly the same amount of time to get there due to the traffic and the difficulty parking, especially in the summer. Torrevieja is unbearable then. It is unbelievably busy. This also applies to Easter or any other holiday time, when all the Madrileños, people from Madrid, arrive at their holiday homes and take over the town. One of the most unbelievable things I have ever seen was one recent Easter time when I had to reluctantly go into Torrevieja. It was even busier than usual as it was market day, and I had my son's German Shepherd dog in the back of my car. It was quite a warm day, but I knew I would be just popping out of the car for a moment, and she would be fine. As long as the car was moving, it was perfectly cool. Suddenly, right in the centre of town near the Estación de Autobuses, the bus station, we hit a traffic jam. The cars were gridlocked. A bus was trying to leave the bus station, but a car had parked badly on the corner and the bus could not swing around it. In typical Spanish fashion, everybody's horns were blaring and people were out of their cars gesticulating and shouting, but the owner of the car did not appear. It seemed to go on forever, and I was worrying about my son's dog that was now starting to pant. Where were the police to tow the car away when you needed them? They'd taken mine away quickly enough when I was being interviewed. This car was parked in a much worse place and it was actually causing an obstruction. Just as it seemed we would be there forever, an amazing thing happened. Approximately 20 guys seemed to appear out of nowhere and approach the offending car. To my total amazement, they positioned themselves around the car, lifted it up, and placed it on the pavement to give the bus room to swing around. This unbelievably worked. The bus just had enough space. There was a nail-biting moment when the front of the bus passed within millimetres of a shop window, but miraculously it just managed to turn with no damage done. The jam eased and we were able to complete our mission. This is a prime example of the difference between Spain and the UK. I do not think that would ever have happened there. Anyway, back to my story. I was working in the academy for approximately €2.50 an hour. I was doing everything I was asked to do, teaching English, reception, cleaning. That's when I discovered that in Spain the wages are terrible. A contract is like gold dust, and most Spanish people will endure low wages as long as they receive some sort of contract, so that they have their social security paid. That way they receive free health care and contribute towards a pension. Also, should they lose their job, they will receive finiquitos, which is a payoff from the employer, and be entitled to paro, unemployment benefit. Many people, as I was, are on part-time contracts but work full-time. It's very expensive for an employer to take someone on a full-time contract, so they don't tend to do it. However, part of my package was to participate in several Spanish courses, so that was very useful, as by now I really was on a mission to learn Spanish. Also, I had to speak Spanish every day with the other people who worked there, so I did improve quite quickly. with a combination of the classes and the daily speaking and listening practice. Another thing that helped immensely was teaching English. My students were mostly Spanish and liked to have things explained to them in Spanish, grammar, etc. I started to advance quite quickly during the 2 years I worked there. I was also watching Spanish television and children's films and videos, pre-DVD or Netflix days, with my son. I read him goodnight stories and helped him with his homework. The hardest thing for me was listening. I got to a stage where I was okay in conversation with one person, but I got a bit lost when in a group. I would always get the joke a couple of seconds after everybody else, and it took a lot of concentration to keep up. One person I worked with was a man called Jose. He was from Andalusia, and I never felt that he liked me very much. His accent was totally impossible to decipher, and it seemed to me that he deliberately spoke quickly, so I'd struggle to understand what he was saying. Many times I had no clue what he was saying, and I would just smile and say, "Sí." One morning I came into work and he was the first person I saw. "Buenos días, Jose, ¿qué tal?" I said. He replied, "Muy bien, porque hoy no tengo la regla." For those of you who do not understand Spanish, this translates to, "Very good, because today I don't have my period." I took a step back and repeated it to him, and he realized that I had, maybe for the first time, understood exactly what he was saying. God knows what he'd been saying to me all those other times. He was so apologetic, and from that day on he treated me with much more respect, and eventually we did become friends. That was a turning point for me with my Spanish. The courses taught at that academy were immersion courses. That is, only Spanish was spoken, even for beginners. This worked well for me as I had only just completed my degree course a year earlier, and my brain was still in studying mode. However, later when I started teaching Spanish, I did discover that many things I had thought I had understood, in fact I hadn't. So the lack of explanation in my own language meant that I'd often got the wrong idea about certain things. For other people, being out of education, for a long time, this method was practically impossible, especially for beginners. I noticed that many British people started the course with enthusiasm, but gave up after just a couple of days. Quite a high percentage of them. This academy offered Spanish classes for German people with explanations in German, and I suggested to my boss that she should think about maybe doing the same thing for English speakers with explanations in English. She rubbished the idea, saying that this was not necessary. English speakers were quite happy with only Spanish spoken. Okay then. These students may not have kicked up a fuss, but they would certainly have gone off and told everyone they know that the course was rubbish and they hadn't learned anything. That's the reason that 2 years after working for a pittance at this school, I finally started to teach Spanish myself. I promoted the fact that my Spanish classes were explained in English. I now have students of all different nationalities, but one thing they have in common is that they speak English, and they like to have the grammar explained to them in a language that they understand. English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, Swedish, Danish, Faroese, Dutch, German, French, Belgian, American, Norwegian, Icelandic, Russian, Polish, New Zealanders, Romanian, Canadians, Australians. They've all passed through the doors of my classroom, Apologies if I've missed any nationality. Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and may your God go with you.